Christmas Day had already been brisk, but nothing compared to the frost that hit when my sister-in-law pointed toward the garage and said, "She's used to scraps." No hint of irony, no hesitation. She simply handed me a paper plate, turned her back, and glided toward the backyard, where the rest of the family was chatting under string lights, sipping champagne and piling finger foods onto porcelain trays, handed out by uniformed servers. I froze for a second, paper plate in hand, my children, Theo, now 14, and Leona, just turned 11, standing behind me. They didn't speak. They only looked at me, eyes steady, waiting for a cue. And I didn't let myself cry, not in front of them, not again. So I pulled a smile over my face like armor, opened the side gate, and led them into the garage. Inside it smelled like storage and old paint. A folding table leaned against the far wall, accompanied by two creaky lawn chairs and an overturned plastic bin used as a stool. There were no festive touches, no music, no laughter, just cold air and the clink of plastic utensils against flimsy paper plates. That was where we had our Christmas meal. My kids didn't say a thing. They sat with practiced posture, their gazes trained on their food. Leona nudged her gingerbread cookie in slow circles with her fork. Theo stared straight ahead, jaw tight the way it gets when emotion backs up in his throat. And in that moment, something settled inside me. I wasn't hurt. Not anymore. I looked at them and knew deeply, finally, I was done seeking acceptance. Then it happened. A black limousine coasted silently up the street. Not an SUV, a limousine. The noise outside the garage stilled. I saw shapes through the sheer white curtains, people pausing mid-bite, heads turning. But the vehicle didn't stop at the front walkway. The driver turned slowly, expertly down the side path, parking just outside the garage. The engine cut off, and a woman stepped out, tall, poised, wrapped in a deep forest green coat that shimmered softly in the pale afternoon light. She glanced around and said, clear and certain, "I'm looking for the owner of this house." And when I stood up, their faces visible through the shifting curtains collapsed into stunned stillness. And if you want more stories like this, honest, hard, but full of the kind of hope you can hold on to, subscribe to the channel. We tell stories that matter. Sometimes they're mine, sometimes they might even be yours. Now let me take you back to that moment, because the limo wasn't the end of the story, it was just where everything started to shift. I hadn't planned on going to my brother's place for Christmas this year. I swore last December would be the last, but then the kids started asking, will Aunt Claire be there? Do you think Grandpa Ron will like my drawing? And before I knew it, I was ironing a second-hand sweater dress and baking cranberry bars in our small apartment kitchen, pretending like everything about it felt normal. We live in a small but cozy two-bedroom flat near the train tracks on the city's edge. It's not fancy, but it's clean and warm and wrapped in the kind of love money can't buy. I work long hours as a dental assistant and take on audio transcription gigs at night to keep us afloat. There's never much left over for extras, but Theo and Leona never ask for more. They just adapt. They always have. Theo is 14 now, already stretching taller than I ever expected. Quiet, composed, with a steady kind of presence. Leona's 11, still soft-hearted, still believing in magic, though I see that faith flicker a little more every year. On Christmas morning, I stood at the mirror, wondering if my boots looked worn or just vintage. I told myself it didn't matter. This was for them. But the truth was some small part of me still wanted to be noticed. Claire and Ron live in a part of town where the gates are decorative, but the distance is real. Their backyard was already buzzing with clinking glasses and polite laughter. When we arrived, buffet tables lined the patio. Waitstaff in bow ties carried trays of shrimp skewers and cider. I took a deep breath and turned to the kids. "You two ready?" Leona nodded, holding our cranberry bars like a gift. Theo just said, "Let's get through it." I knocked once, then let us in through the side gate. No one greeted us. They never do. I walked in always like a guest at my own family's celebration. My dad, Ron, barely looked up from the fire pit where he was talking sports with Claire's father. "Hi, Dad," I said, setting the dessert down. He gave a distracted smile and turned back to his conversation. "Long drive?" he asked, already halfway done listening. Claire appeared beside the grill in a cream coat and heels way too high for uneven lawn. "Oh, you brought something," she said, eyeing the pan. "That's sweet." Ron strolled past, holding a glass of scotch. "Hey, June," he said using the nickname I hated. Kids look big. There were no offers of cider, no plate of cookies passed our way. No welcome, no warmth, just noise, just status. My cousins were gathered in curated clusters, their laughter like rehearsed applause, their children handing out ornaments for some backyard game. And then there was me with my 2 kids beside me smiling through the discomfort, like I always do. Leona leaned in and whispered, "Can I give Grandpa my drawing? Now?" I nodded. She walked across the patio and held it out like it was something sacred. He glanced at it, nodded once and said, "Very festive." That was when I knew we didn't belong here, not really, but it was too late to make a clean exit. Lunch was being prepped, and I told myself we could endure just 1 hour, just long enough to show up, just long enough not to upset anyone. Then Claire reappeared holding a short stack of red paper plates. Her gaze met mine, and I swear there was a glint of amusement in it. "It's a bit crowded," she announced cheerfully like it was nothing. "So we've set up a little spot for you guys out back near the side shed." At first I didn't get it. "The shed?" I asked, half laughing, thinking she was joking. She nodded, perfectly composed. "Yeah, you're used to scraps, right?" Every laugh, every clink, every sip on that patio came to a dead stop. No one spoke, no one interrupted, just silence and me standing there suddenly exposed again like a stray. Someone forgot to shoo away. Theo and Leona looked up at me unsure. Waiting. I forced a smile. I took the plates from her hand and walked with them to the shed. It was cold, not just from the wind slicing through the backyard, but from the feeling being sent somewhere meant for tools and boxes, not people. The air smelled like damp wood rust and insulation. Inside was a weathered table, 2 plastic chairs and a small upturned tub. No garland, no candles. Just a roll of napkins and a few bent forks. One of Claire's kids' old booster seats sat in the corner like an afterthought. Theo sat down slowly. Leona looked around, then slipped her hand into mine. "Is this where we're supposed to eat?" she whispered. I nodded. She said nothing else, just climbed onto the tub and adjusted her sweater so it wouldn't wrinkle. I laid out the food we'd been given: cold ham slices, watery potatoes, green beans that tasted like they'd come straight from a can. No rolls, no extras. No one came to check on us. Theo held his fork motionless for nearly a minute before poking the ham. "Why are we out here?" he asked, still not looking up. I had no answer. Leona's eyes shimmered, but she blinked quickly, trying to hold it in. "Did we do something wrong?" she asked. I swallowed back the knot in my throat. "No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong." "Then why are we the only ones not with family?" she said. "It doesn't feel like Christmas." And in that moment, I couldn't speak. My throat ached with a quiet shame, not the kind they tried to place on me, but the kind I felt for letting it get this far, for thinking we ever had a place at their table. My chest ached, not the kind of pain that screams, but the slow grinding weight you carry when you've spent years trying to matter to people who decided long ago you didn't. I wanted to storm back into that backyard, shove over the perfectly arranged charcuterie board, say every sharp truth I'd swallowed whole. I wanted to shout to make them hear what they never cared to listen to. But instead I looked at Theo and Leona, and what I felt was even heavier than anger. It was shame. Not because I had done something wrong, but because I'd let it stretch this far. Because I'd dragged my children into this year after year, hoping naively that maybe this time it would be different. That maybe we'd be welcomed, maybe we'd be seen. I'd spent my entire life trying to take up less space to be easy to say thank you, even when the kindness was empty. I thought if I worked hard enough, smiled politely, kept my head down, eventually I'd be invited in. But here we were in the shed, and it was never just about seating. It was about what the seating meant. That we were outsiders, that we weren't part of the picture. And now my kids were old enough to feel that too. Old enough to remember. Theo turned to me, voice low and numb. "Can we go?" He wasn't mad, he was done. And somehow that cut deeper than anything. I reached over and touched his shoulder. Soon we sat there in silence, nibbling at cold food, like it was a performance we couldn't leave mid-act. From inside the house we heard laughter music, the hum of a blender. Our absence didn't register at all. Every now and then, a door creaked open, or someone popped a bottle of wine, but no one came to check. Claire's laugh rang out polished and performative, Dad's voice, deep and low, murmured something about the champagne being just right this year. Not a single mention of us, not even a token one. Then Leona whispered, I miss our house. And Theo, without missing a beat, added, It's not small. It's enough. I almost lost it, but instead, I smiled, fragile, forced, and said, We'll go soon, and when we do, we're going to drink cocoa, play Uno, and be thankful for what we have, not what they pretend we should want. They both nodded, and that's when I knew, truly knew this wasn't my family anymore. Blood only makes you related. Behavior defines your people, and mine were sitting right in front of me. I started stacking the plates, ready to leave the shame behind. Then the headlights, a slow sweep across the driveway. A black limousine glided up the street like it had been summoned by quiet dignity. Not a guest's car, not Ron's legal client, a limo, sleek, tinted, silent. The driver in a dark cap and crisp gloves pulled into the driveway and eased to a stop just outside the shed. Theo leaned closer to the tiny, dusty window. Mom, is that for us? I didn't answer. I just stared. The house went still. The music inside faded to a whisper. Shadows shifted behind the curtain as heads turned. The driver stepped out. First, said something I couldn't hear, then walked back and opened the door with practiced precision. And she stepped out, a woman, late 60s, maybe early 70s. Tall, composed hair pulled back in soft waves, she wore a long, forest green wool coat that shimmered like pine needles in moonlight. Not flashy, not loud, just real. The kind of elegance that never needed to raise its voice. She didn't go to the front door like anyone would have expected. Instead, she walked along the path toward the shed. Theo froze. Leona stood clutching my arm. Is she coming here? The woman stopped just outside the door. I opened it halfway, a gust of winter air brushing past. She didn't flinch. Her eyes landed on me, calm and certain. Excuse me, she said, voice even and kind. I'm looking for the owner of this house. For a second, I assumed she was there for Claire A. client, maybe. But something in her gaze told me otherwise. That would be my sister. She's inside, I answered, cautious. She tilted her head, then smiled. And you are Juniper Ellis. She stepped forward. Yes, you're exactly who I came to see. The shed went silent. Leona clutched my hand. Theo straightened like he didn't know whether to shield me or trust what was unfolding. Do I know you? I asked, hesitant. The woman smiled again, this time with warmth that reached her eyes. My name is Eleanor Wade. I'm the founder of Rise and Echo, a women's initiative focused on community storytelling and leadership. About 5 years ago, you volunteered at one of our shelters. You wrote about it online. It was raw, unfiltered, and quietly powerful. My breath caught, I remembered. It was the winter after I left my marriage. I was staying with a friend. I felt invisible, and those posts were just a way to survive the nights. 20 people might have read them. I've been following your voice ever since Eleanor said, you have a way of making people feel seen, and we need that now more than ever. I couldn't respond. I was still trying to process the shift, the impossibility of someone like her finding someone like me here. We're putting together a national speaker series, she continued. I want you to be our keynote. We'll handle everything. Travel, hotel, childcare if needed. And we'd like to publish your story. Your voice matters. Juniper. And it's time more people heard it. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The disbelief sat heavy in my chest next to years of silenced worth. My whole life I'd been told directly or not that women like me don't get seen. But Eleanor Wade had just walked through the cold and knocked on a shed door. For me, Theo was the one who finally broke the silence. Wait. She wants you to speak. Leona turned to me, eyes wide and lit up like fairy lights. Because of your writing. Eleanor smiled gently at both of them. Because your mom is extraordinary. And for the first time in a long, long while, I let myself believe it. I turned my head toward the house. I couldn't see their faces through the glass, but I didn't need to. I could feel it. The unease, the stunned silence. It moved like a ripple from the kitchen to the patio, to the fireplace where they were sipping spiced wine and pretending perfection. They had sent me to the shed to keep me out of sight. But now a limousine had pulled up into their picture-perfect Christmas, and someone important had asked for me. I turned back to Eleanor, I nodded. Yes, I said, steady and sure I'd be honored. Eleanor extended her hand. No dramatics, no fanfare. Just calm, earned dignity. The kind of gesture that wasn't about charity or pity, but respect. Real earned overdue respect. I placed my fingers in hers, and as I stepped toward her, something inside me stood a little taller. Not because I was proud, but because I was finally seen. I'll grab our coats, I said, still breathless. You won't need them, she smiled. We've got everything taken care of. Theo carefully gathered our leftover cranberry bars, like they were something valuable. Leona reached for my hand again, her face glowing like she'd just realized we were in the middle of our own movie, and I was the main character. We followed Eleanor out to the limo. The cold December air bit at our cheeks, but it felt less like leaving something behind, and more like stepping into something we'd earned. As I climbed into the car, I turned for one last look. Through the split in the dining room curtain, I saw them frozen in a moment. They hadn't rehearsed, for Claire stood stiffly near the buffet. Her champagne flute caught mid-air, mouth slightly open, eyebrows arched high in a mix of confusion and something else, disbelief wrapped in irritation. Her smile, the one she always wore like armor, was gone, replaced by a twitch of the lips that couldn't decide whether to sneer or pout. Ron hovered behind her, his expression slack, as if his brain hadn't caught up to what his eyes were seeing. His hand hung awkwardly at his side, no witty remark ready, no performative toast to offer, just silence. And my father still seated at the end of the long table, shoulders, hunched lips, pursed. He squinted through the glass like he was trying to undo the moment with sheer will, like maybe if he stared long enough I'd vanish back into the corner where they preferred me. They didn't look angry, not in the explosive way, but it was all there in the little cracks, the clenched jaw, the sudden stillness, the barely concealed narrowing of Claire's eyes. It wasn't just shock, it was envy, the kind that bubbles up when the story no longer belongs to them, when someone they'd written off steps into a role they never thought she'd claim. The limo door shut with a soft thud behind us. Inside the seats were warm and soft as butter. The lights glowed low and golden, not like celebration, but like peace. Eleanor spoke gently to the driver through the divider, then turned back to me with a look that said, "This is only the beginning." And it was, "We've got dinner downtown, just us. I thought we'd talk through the speaker series, the contract, and what kind of support you'll need over the next few months." I blinked, still catching up to the moment. That sounds perfect," I managed. Leona leaned against my shoulder. "Is this what being famous feels like?" I laughed, quiet, genuine, no bitterness in it. "No, baby. This is what respect feels like." Theo didn't say much, but I caught the way his shoulders eased, the way the guarded edge in his eyes softened. That was enough for me. As the limo pulled away from the curb, I caught one last glimpse of the house in the side mirror. It looked smaller now. Not the bricks and beams, but what it meant. I no longer needed anything from it. I wasn't looking for a seat at their table anymore. I was building my own. Dinner that night felt like something out of a storybook. A real table, soft napkins, fresh bread, and waiters who addressed me like I mattered. But the magic wasn't in the food, it was in the way. Eleanor leaned in to listen, not to fix, not to respond, just to understand. She took notes when I told her about late nights on the floor applying for jobs, about how being a single mom meant becoming fluent in invisible strength. She smiled when I shared how Leona once helped me sort job applications by color, and how Theo, just 12 at the time, had once Googled how to pay rent with no money after hearing me cry behind the bathroom door. "We need your voice," she said again. "People assume inspiration comes from big shiny lives, but the real heroes are the quiet ones who keep showing up when no one claps." When the bill came, Eleanor waved it away with a smile. "You've already paid enough," she said. "Let us carry it from here." The ride home was hushed, not with awkwardness, but with the kind of calm that only comes after a storm. I tucked Leona into bed that night. Before I turned off her fairy lights, she whispered, "I'm glad they put us in the shed." I blinked. "You are." She nodded. "Yeah, 'cause if they hadn't, the limo wouldn't have known where to find us." And I paused, because she was right. Sometimes the world pushes you to the margins not to hurt you, but so you can finally be found. I kissed her forehead. "You're smart." She smiled sleepily. "I get it from my mom." And that was the first night I believed it. And just like that, I finally understood. They hadn't broken me that Christmas. They'd revealed me. It's been nearly a year since that cold afternoon in the shed, and in some ways I'm still growing into the woman who walked out of that backyard with her head held high. Some changes came fast: emails, phone calls, introductions I never expected. When Eleanor's team announced me as the opening speaker for their winter summit, everything shifted. There was the publishing contract that landed in my inbox with the subject line, "Your voice matters," and suddenly people started saying my name, not as Claire's sister, not as Ron's daughter, but just Juniper. But other changes were softer, the kind that happen in silence, in stillness. In the moment you stop apologizing for existing. When you realize you don't have to contort yourself to be worthy. When you start to believe your story doesn't need permission to be told. That keynote night was terrifying and beautiful. I stood on a stage in front of women, executives, teachers, nurses, single moms, students, and I told them the truth. About the shed, about Theo and Leona. About the years I spent trying to be palatable enough for a family that never had a seat waiting. I saw strangers cry. I saw them nod. And afterward they stood in line just to say thank you. That was my story too. In that moment, I felt more at home than I ever had in my childhood house. The book came a few months later. We named it More Than the Leftovers. I cried when I saw the cover. My name, finally in bold. Not buried beneath someone else's legacy. Not hidden behind family shadows. Mine. The money wasn't life-changing, but the validation was. Theo writes, now he keeps a journal. Last week he read me a poem he titled, Walls Don't Make a Home. He doesn't talk much about last Christmas, but I know it marked him, and I think he's learning how to take that scar and turn it into light. Leona's still Leona, observant and generous. She asked if we could host Christmas this year. Just us, she said, and maybe a few people who actually like being around us. No folding chairs. She added, only cushions, couches, and a lot of warm food. So we did. The living room was too small. The table wobbled. Some people ate on the floor, with plates balanced on knees. But no one cared. There was music, laughter, and second helpings. There was no performance, just presence. No one asked about Claire, and I didn't offer. My father sent a short text that morning. 2 lines. Hope you're good. Miss you sometimes. I stared at it for a while before replying. We're doing well, wishing you peace. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. Because this is what I've learned since that day in the shed. You can spend years trying to earn the love of people who never learned how to give it. Or you can give that love to yourself and watch how everything shifts. There's power in stepping away. Power in building something from scratch. Your own rhythm, your own table, your own name. And sometimes when you least expect it, life drives up in a limousine and reminds you, just because they didn't see your worth doesn't mean it wasn't there. It always was, and maybe, just maybe, being sent to the shed wasn't the insult I thought it was. Maybe it was the invitation I didn't know I needed. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt small, unseen, or dismissed, I hope you know this. You were never alone. Not really. We all deserve a place where we are cherished, not tolerated. And if they won't make space for you at their table, build your own. And trust me, if it's built with truth and love, the right people will show up.